It was supposed to be a fun night out with friends at a hotel party, but by morning, a young woman by the name of Kenneka Jenkins went missing without a trace. And hours later, her body was discovered in a hotel freezer. Many wonder, was this just a tragic accident, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? As we unravel the investigation, the autopsy findings, and the differing theories, one question remains: what really happened to Kenneka Jenkins? Now, I'm going to share with you my nursing take on today's case, and I do have a perspective on her story that I've actually not heard before. So even if you've heard her story, you're definitely going to want to listen today. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everyone. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below any cases you want me to check out. All right, everyone, let's get started. Kenneka Jenkins was so much more than a headline. She was a 19-year-old young woman from the west side of Chicago, a beloved daughter, sister, and friend known for her warm personality and bright smile. Born on May 27, 1998, Kenneka was just entering into adulthood, full of hopes and ambitions. In fact, she had just landed a new job at a nursing home and was planning to celebrate her new job with her friends on Friday night, September 8, 2017. That evening, Kenneka told her mother, Teresa Martin, that she was just going to go bowling with some friends, but she left out one important detail. The celebration would actually be an overnight hotel party in the suburbs of Rosemont, Illinois. Maybe she left out the hotel part to avoid worrying her protective mom, but still, Teresa trusted her daughter and lent Kenneka the car for the night. A lot of teenagers can say that they've done this, though. At around 11:30 p.m., Kenneka hugged her mom goodbye and stepped out into the late summer night, car keys in hand, unaware that that would be the last time she'd ever walk out of her home. With two close friends by her side, Kenneka headed towards Rosemont, which is a town just outside of Chicago near O'Hare Airport. Their destination was the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel and Conference Center, where a friend's party was being held in room 926 on the 9th floor. The Crowne Plaza on a Friday night was always packed with travelers and events, and it was honestly just a place that everyone would frequently hang out and get together. Surveillance footage later confirmed that Kenneka arrived at the hotel around 1:13 in the morning in the early minutes of Saturday. In the grainy video, she walks into the lobby in a single file line with her three girlfriends, laughing and chatting like you would just expect. They were excited. In that video, she's actually seen wearing a denim jacket and ripped jeans. One piece of evidence that came from that night on a Facebook Live that was streamed from the hotel room even shows Kenneka in the background sitting on a bed while the music's blaring, proof that the party's early hours were fun, and she was present and seemed to be okay, but more to come later on that. Inside room 926, the celebration was in full swing. Approximately 30 people, mostly young adults from Chicago, crowded into the hotel room, dancing, laughing, and enjoying themselves. Alcohol also flowed freely. Witnesses later mentioned seeing Kenneka drinking cognac from a cup during that party. But according to everyone that knew her, Kenneka was not a heavy drinker. In fact, she had a low tolerance for alcohol. Her mother later said, quote, "1 cup is too much for her," end quote, emphasizing that even a small amount would get Kenneka intoxicated. That night, as the music played and selfies were taken, those who knew Kenneka noticed that she wasn't acting like her usual upbeat self. An acquaintance at the party remembered Kenneka giving him a hug, but said that she was actually swaying a bit as she embraced him, making it really clear that she felt unsteady on her feet. Another partygoer said that Kenneka was normally the life of the party and dancing, but she had grown quiet and withdrawn as that night wore on, at one point looking sad, sitting down, and different from the rest of the crowd. This quiet behavior was really out of character for the typically vivacious young woman, and it seemed to be possibly the effects of the alcohol kicking in. What no one realized, though, was that something more than alcohol might have been influencing Kenneka. Unknown to her, possibly, and her friends, Kenneka had somehow ingested a medication called topiramate that night, which is actually a prescription anti-seizure and migraine medication. Kenneka did not have a prescription for topiramate, or Topamax as it's also called, that's its brand name, and how it got into her system still remains a mystery. But toxicology tests later confirmed its presence in her blood, which we're going to be digging into here shortly. On its own, topiramate can cause dizziness, confusion, and poor coordination. Now, combining it with alcohol, it dramatically intensifies disorientation and would actually make you feel sedated. This is why it's taught, at least from the nurses and doctors' perspective, to never drink or mix alcohol with this medication. And we don't even know how this got in her system. In hindsight, this does help to explain why Kenneka became so impaired so quickly, though. The cognac that she was drinking was interacting with the drug in her system, making her far more unsteady than alcohol would have on its own. At the time, however, her friends had no idea that anything other than alcohol was in her system. They simply saw their friend getting very drunk and perhaps assumed that it was just a weirdly strong reaction to liquor that night. As 1:30 came and went, Kenneka's older sister, Lenore Harris, called to just check on her. It was a quick phone call during the party. Lenore just wanted to check on her and make sure that her sister was okay. Kenneka answered, assuring her that everything was fine. This call was the last time that any of Kenneka's family would ever speak with her again. Not long after that call, in the very early hours of Saturday, September 9th, 2017, the gathering began to wind down. It had been a fun night, but it was late, and people were getting ready to leave. Kenneka and her close friends decided that it was time to head home. The plan was for Kenneka, who was actually supposed to be the designated driver that night, to drop her friends off and then return her mother her car. As the friends prepared to leave the hotel, Kenneka realized that she didn't have any of her personal belongings with her. Her phone and her keys were missing at that point. After a moment of confusion, they remembered that during the party, Kenneka had actually set her things down, potentially on the bed in the hotel room in room 926. By now, it was around 2:30 in the morning. Kenneka was visibly intoxicated and unsteady, so instead of all of them going back into that crowded room, her two friends volunteered to go get Kenneka's belongings for her. They told Kenneka to just please stay put by the elevator on the 9th floor and just wait a couple of minutes for them to go get her belongings and come back. Kenneka agreed and stayed behind in the hallway while her friends re-entered the hotel room. We can only imagine Kenneka's state as she stood there in that 9th floor hallway alone. The hallway was likely quiet now, with the party dying down and other guests asleep by that time. Kenneka was feeling woozy, and as minutes ticked by, she did something that would have dire consequences. She wandered away, and she didn't have anything with her to call for help. When Kenneka's friends emerged from room 926 with her phone and her keys just a few minutes later, they were expecting to find her waiting by the elevator still, but Kenneka was gone. The hallway was empty. The girls called out her name into the stillness, and they heard no reply in turn. They checked corridors on that floor, thinking maybe she'd gotten impatient and started walking around, but there was no sign of Kenneka. In the span of only a brief moment, their friend had vanished. As one of the friends later texted in a panic, quote, "Kenneka is drunk and missing," end quote. At first, the group wasn't super alarmed. They figured that Kenneka might have just gone back down to the lobby or even stepped outside for some fresh air just to sober up. But as those minutes passed with no word from her, their concern grew. They had her phone. The two friends searched frantically for about an hour, scouring different floors and common areas of the hotel, and got a couple of the other partygoers to help them in the search. By 4 a.m., after exhausting their own search and now terrified, they realized that they needed additional help. They gathered together in Kenneka's car in the hotel parking lot, and the friends did the only thing that they could think to do at this point. They called Kenneka's mom. Using Kenneka's own phone, which, again, they now have, they dialed Teresa Martin at 4 in the morning. Teresa woke to every parent's worst nightmare, a call saying, quote, "We can't find Kenneka," end quote. On the line, Kenneka's friends, voices shaking, explained that they were at a hotel in Rosemont and had lost track of her daughter. They admitted that they had been drinking at a party and that Kenneka was intoxicated. They also confessed that Kenneka's car and cell phone were with them, even though Kenneka herself was nowhere to be found. This detail baffled and alarmed Teresa. Why would her daughter's friends leave her at the hotel with Kenneka's car and her phone without Kenneka? The scenario was confusing and immediately set off alarm bells in the pit of Teresa's stomach. I'm sure most of us listening can relate to that feeling of your heart dropping when you receive a bad phone call, but I cannot imagine how much worse it is when we're talking about your child. Teresa didn't waste a single moment. She threw on clothes, gathered a couple of family members, and sped towards Rosemont to find her child, as any good mom would. By 5:30 in the morning, while it was still dark in those early morning hours, Teresa arrived at the Crowne Plaza Hotel with one single goal: to locate her child. A mother's intuition told her something had terribly happened, though. What Teresa didn't yet know was that Kenneka had been captured on surveillance cameras stumbling through the halls after 3 a.m. images that would soon help unravel the mystery of what happened to her that night. But for now, Teresa's urgent cries for help would be met with frustrating obstacles, and the fate of her daughter currently remained unknown. The night of celebration had turned into a nightmare, and the tragic story of Kenneka Jenkins was only beginning to unfold. Teresa Martin burst into the Crowne Plaza Hotel lobby at about 5:30 in the morning on Saturday, desperate for assistance in finding her daughter. She immediately begged the hotel staff to help locate Kenneka. Could they review security cameras to see where she went, maybe? Could they make an announcement or let her knock on doors? Teresa was frantic, explaining that Kenneka was not the type of girl to run off and that she'd been drinking and might be in danger. But instead of organizing a quick search, hotel personnel gave her an infuriating answer. They couldn't show her any surveillance footage without a police report. Privacy rules and protocol took precedence over a mother's panic and heartbreak. They also refused to allow her to go knock on people's doors to see if anyone else had seen her. Let me know in the comments if this frustrates you just as much as it does me. They didn't seem to make Kenneka a priority whatsoever. And even if they couldn't show Teresa the footage themselves, they could have immediately began reviewing it on their own, in my opinion. Frustrated and alarmed, Teresa then dialed 911 from the hotel to report her daughter missing. In that recorded call placed at about 7:14 in the morning on September 9th, her voice shook with urgency as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. She emphasized that her daughter didn't have a history of disappearing and that she had a light tolerance for alcohol and could be in danger if intoxicated and alone. Teresa pleaded, trying to convey that Kenneka would never just wander off without her phone or telltale signs unless something had been wrong. The police dispatcher, however, did not share Teresa's sense of immediate doom. He suggested Kenneka might have simply, quote, passed out, end quote, somewhere after partying, which is an unfortunately common scenario in these type of calls. The dispatcher said to give it some time, recommending that the family go home and relax for a couple of hours and see if Kenneka turned up. It was the kind of guidance offered routinely to worried parents about their older teenagers or young adults, implying that in many cases, the missing person eventually reappears safe. But in Teresa's gut, this did not feel like a false alarm at all. She knew her daughter. She knew that something was wrong. Being told to relax under these circumstances is inappropriate and agonizing. And in my opinion, for what it's worth, I think it's wrong. Unwilling to simply wait around, Teresa and her relatives took matters into their own hands that Saturday morning. They canvassed the hotel on foot, knocked on guest doors from the top floor down, and asked if anyone had seen Kenneka. Most guests were either unaware of the situation or annoyed at being disturbed so early in the morning. Eventually, around 8:30 in the morning, a concerned hotel employee actually called 911 himself to complain about the commotion that Teresa was causing. Instead of rallying to help find Kenneka, someone at the hotel phoned police to report the family's behavior. This call did finally prompt a more thorough review of the security footage later, but at the time, it only added to the family's frustration. By late morning, more than 8 hours had passed since Kenneka was last seen on camera stumbling through the hotel, and still, no one in authority had thoroughly searched the premises. Finally, around 12:46 p.m. on Saturday, September 9th, Kenneka's older sister, Lenore Harris, went down to the Rosemont police station and filed a missing persons report. If you remember, Teresa called and tried to file one, but they brushed her off, so her sister went straight to the station. By 1:15 p.m., officers notified Crowne Plaza management of the missing persons case and coordinated with the hotel security to begin a formal search of the property. Kenneka had been missing now for roughly 10 hours at this point. And from a nursing perspective, this makes me really mad, and you're going to understand why I say that here shortly. From the family's standpoint, those were 10 critical hours lost, hours during which, had authorities taken them seriously earlier, Kenneka might have been found in time. Illinois has no mandatory waiting period for filing a missing persons report, especially when someone could be in danger. In hindsight, police acknowledged that they could have treated this with more urgency from the start, and I agree. As Teresa later stated, quote, "We were begging for help and no one was helping," end quote. Once police were finally fully engaged that Saturday afternoon, they and the hotel staff performed a quick search of all the common areas once again, stairwells, and the vicinity of the 9th floor party room. They walked the hallways calling Kenneka's name, checked public restrooms, even peered into conference rooms. but there was no sign of Kenneka. Early on, security personnel had briefly skimmed surveillance footage from the exits to see if Kenneka had even left the building, but those initial scans showed nothing. It appeared that she had never left the hotel or any of the main doors. As afternoon turned to evening, Kenneka's whereabouts were still a mystery. By now, word of the strange disappearance had spread all among Kenneka's extended family and friends, many of whom began gathering anxiously outside the hotel. Some of them held up their phones, scrolling through social media, hoping to see some kind of clue, and also said worried prayers. A sense of dread hung in the air as the sun set on that long, horrible day. It wasn't until late Saturday, almost a full day since Kenneka went missing, that a crucial break would come in the case. At around 10 p.m. on September 9th, Rosemont police officers decided to take a much closer look at the hotel's initial surveillance recordings, deeper than just exits and entrances. This time, they combed through hours of footage from cameras recovering the hotel's back hallways, service corridors, and unused areas. And then, finally, they saw her. On a gray monitor, the officers spotted Kenneka Jenkins in the early morning hours of that same day. There she was, at around 3:20 in the morning, captured by a camera, wandering through a lower-level hallway of the hotel alone. The video clip was brief but really upsetting. Kenneka was clearly disoriented and stumbling, appearing very impaired as she stumbled along an empty hallway. She even bounced off the wall at one point to steady herself. This video confirmed that Kenneka never left the hotel in those early hours. She had been inside the whole time, lost and alone, and they needed to find her. Following Kenneka's path on camera, police traced her movement further. The last surveillance footage of her was time-stamped at 3:32 in the morning. In that final clip, Kenneka is seen on security camera entering an empty hotel kitchen on a lower level. The video shows her shuffling into a large vacant kitchen space, all stainless steel counters and red floor tiles, and for a moment she steadies her gait, perhaps thinking that she's found an exit or maybe her way back into the lobby. But the kitchen was dark and out of service, a part of the hotel's convention area that was closed for renovations. Kenneka was filmed walking by an industrial sink and metal preparation table, swaying slightly from side to side. Then she moves out of frame, heading back into the corner of the kitchen, and disappears from camera view. That was the last time Kenneka Jenkins was seen alive on video. Just around that corner, as police knew from that kitchen layout, was the entrance to a large walk-in cooler and freezer unit. The freezer was apparently running, keeping its chamber extremely cold, even though this kitchen was not being used at the time. With a sinking feeling, officers realized that they likely had discovered an answer to a question that they had been tormented by for over 20 hours. Where did Kenneka go? The evidence strongly suggested that in her impaired state, Kenneka had opened the heavy freezer door, stepped inside, and become trapped in that icy vault. Armed with this new information, officers and hotel staff raced to the area that they had seen on the footage. Accompanied by a hotel employee, a Rosemont police officer descended into the basement kitchen to physically inspect the walk-in freezer. I want to add that earlier that evening, around 8:30 p.m., a security guard had briefly poked his head into the same kitchen area during the search, but reportedly didn't notice anything abnormal. In the dim lighting, he likely hadn't checked inside the freezer. But now, just after midnight on Sunday, September 10th, 2017, nearly a full day after she had been missing, the officer and the hotel employee approached the gray metal door of the walk-in freezer. The employee grasped the handle and pulled it open, and there on the floor, they found Kenneka. It was 12:25 a.m. when Kenneka Jenkins' body was discovered in that freezer. She was lying on her side, face down on the freezer floor with one shoe off. Her hair was disheveled, and her clothing was still slightly wet with condensation. She wasn't moving. The employee shouted for the officer, who quickly checked Kenneka for any sign of life. She was cold to the touch and unresponsive. They radioed for backup and medical assistance. Within minutes, the kitchen was swarming with police officers and emergency responders rushing in under the harsh fluorescent lights. Tragically, it was far too late to save her. At approximately 12:48 in the morning, Kenneka Jenkins was officially pronounced dead at the scene. At nearly 21 hours after she had stumbled away from her friends, the search for Kenneka had come to a heartbreaking end. Teresa Martin, who had been waiting nearby with other family members, saw the sudden flurry of police activity and sensed the worst. Moms always know. Officers met her and gently led her into the taped-off area of the kitchen to confirm what they had already suspected. In a surreal and devastating moment, they showed Teresa, the young woman, her baby, lying lifeless on the freezer floor. It was Kenneka. Overwhelmed with grief, Teresa collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, screaming, "My baby." Her worst nightmare had come true. The very hotel that refused to let her see that initial footage earlier was now the scene of her daughter's death. Family members held each other and wept as the reality set in that Kenneka was gone. Teresa cried out saying, quote, "I trusted you all would find her," end quote, heartbroken and angry that it took them so long. As dawn approached on Sunday, yellow police tape went up around the area. Detectives began photographing the scene and collecting evidence in the kitchen and freezer, treating it as a potential crime scene until proven otherwise. Outside the hotel, the news of Kenneka's death spread quickly. By sunrise, news crews had arrived and a crowd of community members gathered, drawn by the shocking news. The sight of a body bag being wheeled out of that hotel in the early morning light, captured on security camera, was later shown on the news, and it sent a shudder through everyone that saw it. A night of celebration had ended in the most tragic way imaginable. But even as Kenneka's body was taken to the medical examiner's office, the mystery of how and why she had passed away was only beginning to gain public attention. In the aftermath, authorities approached Kenneka's death as a tragic accident in need of full investigation to be certain that it was an accident. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office performed an autopsy on Kenneka later that Sunday, September 10th, to determine the actual cause of death. Initially, the medical examiner listed the cause and manner of death as, quote, "pending further study," end quote, which left the public anxiously speculating for weeks. Finally, on October 6, 2017, the ME announced its official findings. Kenneka Jenkins' death was ruled an accident. The primary cause, hypothermia due to cold exposure inside that walk-in freezer. To sum it up, Kenneka froze to death after being enclosed in sub-zero temperatures for an extended period of time. The autopsy report painted a heartbreaking picture of Kenneka's final hours. Her body's core temperature had plummeted in the freezer, leading to organ failure consistent with hypothermia. Investigators noted that even 2 hours after the freezer door was opened and the refrigeration system was shut off for the investigation, the internal temperature was only 34 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius. That implies that while sealed shut, the freezer was likely well below freezing, cold enough to fatally lower any person's body temperature in a matter of hours. The medical examiner found lesions in Kenneka's stomach lining, which are telltale signs seen in hypothermic deaths. These tiny erosions in the stomach are thought to be a result from the stress and reduced blood flow of extreme cold. Their presence corroborated that Kenneka had succumbed to the freezing temperatures. I really wanted to just share the facts in this case and kind of let you all decide for yourselves what your thoughts are. But my nurse heart is just stuck on one thing, although there's a lot about this case that bothers me, but that's response time. Kenneka's friends called Teresa, if you remember, at about 4 in the morning, and Teresa was at that hotel begging to review the CCTV footage by 5:30. I don't want to get too deep into critical care nursing because it is very complex, but I will say this. There's a therapy that's used frequently called targeted temperature management to assist us in saving lives. This lowers the core body temperature to reduce stress in the body for critical patients that have had life-threatening conditions like cardiac arrest and brain trauma. I only mention this to you because we know the tentative timeline that Kenneka went into the freezer and Teresa showed up only about an hour and a half later. I believe that, had they taken Teresa seriously, this may have turned out differently. I know that that's a bold claim, but I'm backing it by science. Knowing our bodies can recover from these lowered temperatures and in certain controlled environments, it's actually beneficial to us, there is a chance that Kenneka could have been saved. I really needed to make that point because it's a perspective that I have not seen talked about anywhere else, and I feel like it's really valid and important. Okay, let's get back to the ME's findings. The autopsy's toxicology tests helped explain why Kenneka couldn't save herself. The toxicology report detected no illegal drugs like MDMA or other harsh drugs or even opiates in her system. However, Kenneka's blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, was at 0.112%, which is way over the legal limit of 0.08 and enough to indicate significant intoxication. For a 19-year-old that's petite, a 0.112 meant that she was undoubtedly impaired, likely drowsy, confused, and uncoordinated. And on top of that, the lab results confirmed the presence of that topamax or topiramate in her blood at a therapeutic level. This is consistent with earlier suspicions. Kenneka had somehow ingested topiramate that night, even though she was never prescribed it. I also want to add that we don't know at this point if she took it voluntarily or not. The combination of alcohol and topiramate proved deadly in this case. As the ME noted, alcohol and topiramate have synergistic effects. Each amplifies the other when taken at the same time. Together, they can cause severe dizziness, confusion, impaired coordination, and memory loss. They also both speed up the onset of hypothermia by depressing the central nervous system. Alcohol, for instance, causes blood vessels to dilate, which actually makes a person lose heat faster and can create a false sensation of warmth, even as your body is getting more cold. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that sensation before or if you know what I'm talking about. Topiramate can disrupt the body's internal thermostat and its ability to shiver, which, if you don't know, that's your body's natural defense against cold. In Kenneka's case, the ME concluded that these substances, quote, hastened the onset of hypothermia and death, end quote, meaning that if she hadn't been intoxicated, she might have survived longer or even managed to escape the freezer. Sadly, impaired and likely exhausted, Kenneka did not find her way out. Besides hypothermia, the autopsy noted some secondary findings. Kenneka's brain was swollen, a condition called cerebral edema. However, the examiner clarified that this swelling was not the cause of death. It can occur as a result of hypoxic injuries or lack of oxygen during the dying process or even post-mortem. We actually touched on that in Shanquilla Robinson's case as well, if you remember. But more importantly, there were no signs of physical trauma or assault. Apart from a small abrasion on her right ankle and a small bruise, a purple bruise on her right leg, Kenneka's body showed no evidence of beating, strangulation, or other types of violence. Her clothing was intact and in place, and she still wore the jewelry that she even had on that night, indicating that there hadn't been a robbery or a violent struggle. The medical examiner stated, quote, there was no other evidence of external or internal trauma due to physical violence, end quote. On that same day, October 6, 2017, the police department echoed the autopsy's findings. They publicly stated that their exhaustive investigation had found no indication of foul play in Kenneka's death. Their statement read, quote, there is no evidence of another person present in the kitchen area with Kenneka immediately prior to her demise, and no evidence that she was forcibly made to consume alcohol or drugs, end quote. It appeared to the police that this was a horrific accident. Kenneka, in a very impaired state, had inadvertently locked herself into a freezer and paid the ultimate price. But even as the authorities presented these findings to the public, many questions remained unanswered. How did Kenneka end up alone long enough for this to happen? Why was that unused freezer even operational and accessible to the hotel guests? Could the staff or police have found her earlier if they had acted quicker? As the story of Kenneka Jenkins' tragic death made headlines, it immediately sparked differing opinions, and not everyone was ready to accept that what happened was simply an accident. Rumors and theories began to swirl, turning Kenneka's case into a national controversy and a social media firestorm, one that would cast doubt on the official narrative and keep Kenneka's name in the public eye long after the freezer was closed. News of Kenneka Jenkins' bizarre and tragic death spread rapidly, first across Chicago and then nationwide. The idea of a young woman wandering into a hotel freezer and dying was so unsettling that it captured people's attention immediately. In the days following the discovery of her body, what began as grief and condolences soon morphed into a wave of anger, suspicion, and endless speculation. On social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Kenneka's story went viral. Thousands of strangers, moved by the tragic circumstances, joined online groups dedicated to finding, quote, justice for Kenneka. From the very beginning, Kenneka's family expressed doubts about the official version of events. Teresa Martin, heartbroken and unconvinced that this was just an accident, voiced her opinions and suspicions bluntly saying, quote, I believe someone in this hotel killed my child, end quote. She said this to reporters shortly after Kenneka's body was found. It was a powerful statement of a mother's intuition and mistrust. Do we blame her for feeling like this, though? Nobody was willing to help her. Teresa simply could not fathom that her daughter had just walked into the freezer on her own and died without some kind of foul play involved. And she was not alone in this belief. Many members of the public, especially in Chicago's communities, found that the scenario of an accidental death was really hard to accept. Given America's history of marginalized cases being brushed aside, of course people needed to know if this was a cover-up, negligence, or even an accident. As Kenneka's case gained traction online, several theories emerged, each more alarming than the last. Some believed that Kenneka had been the victim of a setup or attack during the hotel party, possibly due to forced intimacy that had went wrong, so her perpetrators hid her body in the freezer. Others floated theories of organ operating rings, suggesting that someone had killed Kenneka to harvest her organs, and the freezer story was a cover. This theory actually gained enough steam that authorities later clarified her organs were intact, and the idea was simply unfounded. Another popular hypothesis was that someone at the hotel, potentially an employee or guest, might have harmed Kenneka and then dumped her body into the freezer to conceal the crime. Each theory cast a wide net of blame, implicating all different types of people, including Kenneka's own friends. The catalyst for a lot of this speculation was a Facebook Live video streamed from the party by one of Kenneka's friends while in that room 926. In the days after Kenneka's death, determined people on the internet repeatedly watched and listened to this video, convinced that it had held additional clues. It's a brief but chaotic clip. The camera mostly pointed at a young woman named Irene, one of Kenneka's friends, who was wearing mirrored sunglasses while music plays loudly in the background and party chatter is heard. Online sleuths actually said that they noticed all sorts of sinister things in this video. For instance, some claimed that they could hear Kenneka slurring, quote, "help me," end quote, in the background of the music, which if true, of course, that would be extremely disturbing to see. This rumor spread like wildfire. However, police later reported that they analyzed the video and that the supposed "help me" part was actually lyrics from a song by Chief Keef that was playing at the party that night. The imagined plea for help was an audio illusion, but many remained unconvinced by the police explanation, still believing the more chilling narrative that Kenneka had cried out in distress. Let me know down below if you've seen this video and if you believe the police explanation or not, because I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Another rumor that took hold was that Kenneka's friends had sold her for $200. This stemmed from Facebook Messenger texts that circulated online when someone speculated that a sum of $200 was involved in Kenneka's disappearance. Internet forums buzzed with the idea that one of the friends accepted that $200 to lure or harm Kenneka. In reality, as police later confirmed, that $200 was likely referring to a parking ticket fine that one friend had mentioned. According to police, this was a completely unrelated matter that got misrepresented by outsiders. Facts did little to suppress the growing legend around the case, though. Kenneka's friends, who were already traumatized by losing their friend, had become targets of vicious online harassment. Strangers accused them of everything from negligence to outright murder. Death threats were made against at least one of the girls who were with Kenneka that night. The online mob was convinced that the friends knew way more than they had let on. In truth, the friends' accounts to police were sometimes inconsistent, which isn't surprising given the fact that they were also intoxicated and frightened that night, but there was zero evidence that any of them had harmed Kenneka. In fact, police later interviewed 30 people who attended that party and found no indication of altercations involving Kenneka that night. One by one, the pieces of evidence eventually gathered by detectives, text messages, phone data, the hotel key card, the footage, they all supported the conclusion that Kenneka's friends simply lost track of her in a terrible, unfortunate series of events rather than orchestrating something nefarious. However, this case truly is polarizing even still, and there's still so much we need to talk about. The social media fury cast the friends as villains in so many people's eyes, causing most of them to flee the Chicago area to escape that hostility. Many focused on the hotel and law enforcement, questioning whether they had done enough or if they were now engaged in a cover-up to protect themselves from liability. The fact that the Crowne Plaza Hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture Kenneka actually entering the freezer became a massive focal point for skepticism as well. People asked, if this was truly an accident, why wasn't there footage of the most important moment? Rosemont police and the hotel explained that the motion-activated camera that was in the kitchen was pointed at the hallway and did not have an angle inside the freezer's doorway. However, a well-known Chicago community activist named Andrew Holmes stirred controversy when he announced that he had seen the video evidence of Kenneka walking into the freezer on her own. Holmes, an anti-violence activist, said on September 14th that he personally had met with Rosemont police and they showed him surveillance footage of Kenneka entering that freezer, apparently alone and of her own accord. He described how Kenneka had wandered into the kitchen, opened that freezer door, and never came back out. Holmes's intention was to crush the escalating conspiracies by assuring the public that there was no assailant on tape, implying that the video, quote, proved it was an accident, end quote. However, this attempt backfired. Kenneka's family publicly pushed back, saying that they had not authorized Holmes to act as their spokesperson and that they themselves had not seen that type of footage either. In fact, later that same day, at a protest outside the hotel, Teresa said that she felt misrepresented by activists who claimed the case was closed. She maintained that until she saw definitive proof with her own eyes, she believed foul play could be involved. Isn't that how it's supposed to be, though? We cannot assume anything without proof, in my opinion. The community was divided. Some took Holmes at his word. Others believed that this was an attempt to quickly shut down the case. It didn't help that Rosemont authorities never released any videos of Kenneka going into the freezer, likely because, as they later clarified, no such video existed from that angle. This discrepancy made Holmes's claim seem suspicious to many. In reality, Holmes likely saw the same final kitchen footage that the public did and inferred what happened, but by presenting it as if there was a clear freezer entry video, he inadvertently fueled the idea that something was being hidden. The family felt blindsided by Holmes's statement. In their view, it undermined their calls for further investigation. This demonstrated the tension between community activists that were eager to find answers and a family that wasn't satisfied with secondhand information. Meanwhile, the Rosemont Police Department insisted that they were not leaving any stones unturned. They continued interviewing witnesses and reviewing digital evidence. Police reports later showed that detectives tracked down individuals named in social media posts as possibly involved, only to find that those leads were all baseless. For example, when internet rumors pointed to a young man that was also seen at the party as a potential suspect, police questioned him and found no evidence linking him to any wrongdoing that night. They also analyzed key card records and security logs to see if anyone entered the unused kitchen area around the time that Kenneka had disappeared. Those logs showed no other entries until Kenneka's body was found that day. The motion-activated camera in that corridor similarly showed no one else going in or out after 3:32 in the morning. These facts strongly indicated that no one had physically placed Kenneka in the freezer or come upon her there. She truly had been in that area alone. By mid-October 2017, Rosemont police issued their final report, which aligned with the medical examiner's findings. All evidence pointed to an accidental death with no foul play. The police firmly stated, quote, "While there are many theories, rumors, and much speculation floating around social media regarding the death of Miss Jenkins, none were supported with facts," end quote. To address public distrust, authorities even did something unusual publicly by releasing a ton of evidence. Surveillance videos totaling 36 hours from 47 different cameras, the call recordings from the 911 operator, and police reports were all made available publicly by the end of October. They hoped that transparency would douse all the wild theories. The surveillance clips did show Kenneka stumbling through the hotel and ultimately into that kitchen, corroborating the timeline that had been described. But, as everyone also saw, the critical moment that she went into the freezer was not captured on camera, and this continued to fuel the fire for alternative theories. Beyond what we saw on social media, real-world protests erupted as people rallied around Kenneka's case. In the weeks after her death, demonstrators gathered outside the Crowne Plaza Rosemont, often chanting "Justice for Kenneka" and demanding answers. They questioned the slow response by police and hotel staff, and some called for an independent investigation, potentially even involving the FBI. The hotel had become a focal point. Night after night, protesters, many of them from Chicago's West Side, where Kenneka actually was from, stood on the sidewalks with signs and sometimes blocked the hotel entrance, accusing the hotel of negligence or much worse. Emotions were raw for everyone involved. To many, Kenneka's death symbolized a pattern of society not protecting young Black women and then not valuing their lives in investigations. Many people wanted to know, why didn't they search for her when her mother asked? Activists like Jedediah Brown helped lead these demonstrations. They aimed to keep pressure on law enforcement and the hotel, fearing that without it, this case might be quietly swept under the rug. The protests were peaceful but passionate. Crowds sometimes swelled to dozens, with people wearing t-shirts bearing Kenneka's face or the phrase, "Justice for Kenneka." They held prayer vigils, released purple balloons, which purple was Kenneka's favorite color, and shared updates with the media outlets that camped nearby. The situation put the Crowne Plaza in harsh light. The hotel's management publicly stated sympathy for Kenneka's family, but was also frustrated at losing business amid the constant protests and negative publicity. For several weeks, the demonstrations continued, though. Protesters demanded that all surveillance footage be released in full, which, as we know already, it was, and that employees on duty that night should be questioned more rigorously. Some even theorized that a hotel worker might have been involved, a claim for which, again, there was no evidence, but it fueled the crowd's feeling that someone needed to be held accountable. Under mounting public pressure, the Rosemont police had reached out to the FBI early on to assist, but the FBI determined that there was no indication for a federal crime and thus did not take over the case. This, however, did little to convince all the skeptics. Many protesters still chanted for an FBI investigation just to have an outside authority double-check the work of the local police, which I totally understand. By late September 2017, about 3 weeks after Kenneka's death, a dramatic turn of events occurred within the movement. Teresa Martin, Kenneka's mother, the very figure who many people were protesting for, released a statement that stunned supporters. In a Facebook Live video on September 24th, Teresa announced, quote, "This protest is over," end quote. She thanked community members for their support, but revealed that she felt some protest organizers were exploiting her daughter's tragedy for their own agendas. Teresa had discovered that certain individuals were collecting donations during the protests, money that she believed was supposed to support the cause, but she wasn't sure where it was really going. She expressed that she never wanted anyone to profit off of Kenneka's name. She said, quote, "I'm ending your agendas that are not righteous towards my child," end quote. This message was clearly aimed at protesters like Jedediah Brown and others. Brown and others were taken aback. They insisted they were not profiting. Brown explained that, quote, "A freedom fund had indeed gathered a few $1,000s, but it was used for food, transportation, and bail for protesters who might have been arrested," end quote, not for personal gain. He said that this fund was separate from donations that were given to the family and that it was created with Teresa's initial blessing. It seems that miscommunication and mistrust had grown between the family and some of the activists. Brown, feeling hurt, stated that members of his own team might have given Martin misleading information about those funds. He respected Teresa's wishes and publicly agreed to stop organizing protests at the hotel, though not without sorrow and a sense of betrayal. Brown said to the media, quote, "After weeks of fighting for her, I don't know if I'm even invited to pay my respects to the young lady that became my whole world," end quote. Following Teresa's request, the organized protests outside Crowne Plaza gradually did wind down. The tent standoffs in Rosemont had slowed by early October, especially as the weather grew colder and the investigation results were released. But Kenneka's case did not fade from public awareness. It simply shifted primarily to online forums and the court of public opinion. And importantly, Kenneka's family was not done fighting for accountability. Teresa Martin wanted answers and changes to ensure that no other parent would suffer the way that she had. In that coming year, that determination would manifest in a major legal action against those that she deemed responsible for the lapses that led to Kenneka's death. Before that, however, Kenneka's loved ones had to do the hardest thing of all: lay her to rest. On September 30th, 2017, a funeral service was held on Chicago's South Side to celebrate Kenneka Jenkins' life and mourn her untimely death. Loved ones who spoke at her service talked about Kenneka's infectious laugh, her love of dancing and fashion, and how she could light up any room she walked into. They mourned the cruelty of a life that was ending just as it was beginning. One family friend said that Kenneka had hoped to perhaps pursue nursing one day, fitting given that she landed that job at the nursing home because she loved helping people. I loved to learn this about her. Over 1,000 people attended, packing the massive House of Hope Church to capacity. Many of those in attendance never met Kenneka personally, but they felt a connection to her story and came to support Teresa Martin. The casket was adorned with bouquets, including one that actually spelled out her nickname in purple flowers, Neka, N-E-K-A. There were few dry eyes in that church. Pastor James Meeks and Andre Williams delivered eulogies, with Pastor Williams movingly saying, quote, "She was sent here to serve a purpose, and that was to touch the world." Kenneka's story truly had touched the world, but in a way that no one had ever hoped for or wanted. As the funeral ended and the last song was sung, the crowd outside released purple balloons into the sky, chanting once again, "Justice for Kenneka," one more time. It was a powerful reminder that while Kenneka was being laid to rest, the pursuit of answers and justice in her name would continue on. Even though the official investigation concluded that Kenneka Jenkins' death was a tragic accident with no foul play, Kenneka's family was not at peace. Teresa Martin and her supporters believed that Kenneka might still be alive if not for those tragic missteps and negligence that others had done, including the hotel and those responsible for safety on the premises. In 2018, about a year after Kenneka's death, Teresa took the next step into her own hands for accountability. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking justice through civil courts. Renowned attorney Jeffrey Feiger took on the case, announcing a $50 million lawsuit against several parties that they had deemed responsible. The defendants included the Crown Plaza Hotel's parent company, the hotel's security firm, and a restaurant that had leased that kitchen space where the freezer was located. The lawsuit laid out a picture of negligence and demanded answers to lingering questions. It claimed that hotel staff had failed to secure a hazardous area, that unused kitchen and freezer, which should have been locked or monitored to prevent guests from accessing it. It also alleged that the hotel and security had failed to properly monitor surveillance cameras and react promptly when Kenneka was first reported missing. Basically, the suit argued that if the hotel had acted with due care at many points by locking an out-of-service freezer, by shutting down the loud, unauthorized party, by responding immediately to a frantic mother, this terrible death could have been avoided. One shocking element of this lawsuit was a focus on the freezer door mechanism itself. At a press conference, Feiger actually held up a photograph of a walk-in freezer door, which was similar to the one in question, that showed a circular lock on the outside of it. He suggested the possibility that someone might have inadvertently or deliberately locked the freezer door from the outside, trapping Kenneka inside. Rosemont authorities quickly countered that the actual freezer in which Kenneka had died latched shut but had no padlocking mechanism on the outside, and surveillance footage showed no person approaching that freezer after Kenneka had entered the kitchen. Photos from the investigation indicated that the freezer door did have an interior safety release, a knob on the inside designed to let someone push the door open from within. Police said that release handle was working and unobstructed when Kenneka was found. This raised a haunting question. Why hadn't Kenneka escaped? It's possibly that in her impaired state and freezing, she didn't understand how to use it or wasn't even conscious enough to try. The lawsuit didn't hinge on the lock theory alone, though. It more broadly implied that multiple failures by hotel staff had actually led to Kenneka's death, even if no one physically put her in the freezer. As the civil case proceeded on, lawyers on both sides gathered evidence, deposed witnesses, and consulted experts on issues like hypothermia and security protocol. The hotel's legal team pushed back, arguing that Kenneka's own intoxication was the primary cause of the tragedy, not negligence by anyone else. They pointed out that no staff actually knew Kenneka was in danger until it was too late, and that once they did help find her. Still, uncomfortable facts for the defense lingered. Hotel security had received noise complaints about the loud party on the 9th floor that night, yet the party was not shut down. And perhaps the most damning evidence, when Teresa first begged for help at 5:30 in the morning, if someone on staff had just reviewed the footage that night then, they might have seen Kenneka heading towards the freezer just hours earlier. The suit argued that these were missed opportunities to save a life, and I completely agree, and I've already shared why. For several years, the case inched through the legal system, all while Kenneka's story remained a hot topic of conversation in the community. Finally, in 2023, 6 years after Kenneka's death, a resolution was reached. In August 2023, it was reported that a settlement deal had finally been struck, and by December, the details went public. The hotel and its insurance company would pay the Jenkins family a substantial sum of money. Media outlets reported the settlement was more than $6 million to be distributed to Kenneka's mother and 2 other family members. But later court records actually indicated that that total was closer to $10 million in compensation for all of them. The exact terms were initially sealed at the family's request due to safety and privacy concerns. Teresa's attorney stated in filings that uncontrolled speculation and social media commentary had led to threats against individuals involved in this case, and confidentiality was crucial for everyone's protection. The settlement did not come with any admission of wrongdoing, but it did still speak volumes. According to court documents, the Crown Plaza's owners and its security contractors were found to be negligent in several ways: not properly securing the kitchen area, not stopping the unauthorized party, and not thoroughly reviewing the security footage in a timely manner when Kenneka was reported missing. For Teresa Martin, this civil outcome validated many of her grievances. In her eyes, the hotel's willingness to pay millions signaled that they recognized that things should have been handled differently that night. Upon settling, Teresa stated, quote, "My life will never be the same. It's a pain that I can't even explain. But I hope this will prevent this from ever happening to someone else again." It's so heartbreaking to hear her words. After 2017, hotel managers all around the country, especially in large chains, tried to learn from what happened to Kenneka. Many hotels reviewed their own safety protocols for off-limit areas like unused kitchens, construction zones, and equipment rooms. Some establishments actually implemented new rules to ensure that walk-in freezers that aren't being used remain padlocked or alarmed to prevent anyone from accidentally getting trapped again. Crown Plaza's management in Rosemont reportedly installed additional security measures around areas under renovation, including more cameras and better door security, in direct response to what happened. Law enforcement agencies in Illinois also informally learned lessons from Kenneka's case. The Rosemont Police Department faced criticism for advising Teresa to wait before filing a report, and I'm glad to hear that. In subsequent missing person calls, especially involving potentially vulnerable young adults, departments indicated that they would err on the side of prompt searches rather than assuming that it's just a routine party scenario. It breaks my heart that it takes devastating losses like this for systems to learn and improve, but it's an unfortunate theme that sadly we will continue to see. This case became a training example, emphasizing that every second counts, particularly if a person could be in danger from elements like weather or, in this case, cold. Illinois police were reminded that there is no legal requirement to wait 24 hours and that families' concerns should be taken seriously from the very beginning. Perhaps one of the most meaningful impacts, though, was the conversation that Kenneka's story ignited about social media's role in justice. On one hand, public pressure through social media kept Kenneka's case in the spotlight, ensuring transparency. The viral calls for justice likely influenced Rosemont police to release that crucial surveillance video and reports in an effort to be transparent. Before Kenneka, a case ruled accidental might not have gotten this level of attention or any disclosure at all. Scholars and commentators said that if it was largely the online activism, the hashtags, Facebook groups, and YouTube analyses, like today, that pressured authorities to not close the book on Kenneka too quickly, then it was a success. She is often mentioned alongside other high-profile cases of mysterious deaths of young women, such as Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old that was found dead in a Los Angeles hotel water tank in 2013 after exhibiting odd behavior on an elevator camera. Both cases went viral online and demonstrated how internet interest can be a double-edged sword. It can crowdsource awareness and tips, but it can also spawn misinformation and unfounded accusations. In Kenneka's case, the social media frenzy had a dark side. People like her friends faced intense harassment and even threats due to theories that spread and many still believe. The Jenkins family, while grateful for the support, also had to plead with the public to stop disseminating wild rumors that only compounded their grief. The desire for justice and truth is powerful, but Kenneka's story became an example about how easily narratives can actually run and harm families and investigations. But the fact is, there's still uncertainty. Let me know in the comments where you stand in Kenneka's case, because I see that there are still a lot of differing theories out there. Kenneka's legacy also created positive community action, though. Her case encouraged many to become more involved in their communities, attending local meetings, advocating for better security in public venues, and supporting families of other missing young people. For Teresa Martin, no legal victory or cultural impact can fill the void that is left behind by her daughter's absence. But she has continued to honor Kenneka's memory through advocacy as well. She has been involved in local initiatives to improve security at events for youth and has spoken at forums about how authorities handle missing person cases. In one interview, she said, quote, "I don't want any other mother to go through what I did, feeling like your cries for help are ignored," end quote. There's a bittersweet hope that Kenneka's legacy will be to create changes that save lives, that hotels will lock those doors, that police will believe worried parents, and that friends will take the extra step to ensure that everyone gets home safe. In December 2023, when that settlement was finalized, Teresa chose not to make a public statement. Instead, her attorneys spoke on her behalf and said that while the monetary settlement could never bring Kenneka back, it acknowledged the pain and suffering, and it closed this chapter. Teresa has said that she prays for healing and wants Kenneka to be remembered not as the girl in the freezer, but as the loving, vibrant young woman that she was. I want to thank you for spending time with me today and listening to Kenneka Jenkins' story. She was a bright 19-year-old that went out to celebrate with friends and never came home. I pray that she is resting peacefully and that her family continues to heal and find comfort. Make sure to send me a blue butterfly as our secret handshake if you made it this far into the video, and please don't forget to drop down case recommendations for me in the comments. I appreciate each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for watching today and for allowing me to tell these victim stories, because they are so important. Please be sure to take extra great care of yourselves this week. Nurses orders. See you next time.